Well, Dr. Kathy, I am so excited to have you back on the Happy Home podcast. And, I have to give a shout out. Well, in your new book, you have a foreword by Jeff Myers, who's the president of Summit Ministries. And my son, Ethan, went to Summit Ministries this past summer, had the time of his life. And when I asked him, who are your favorite speakers? And he said, Dr. Kathy Cook. So I just want to tell you, you are connecting with teenagers, young people, and making such a difference. So that was really, really cool.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be back. And yeah, you and I both appreciate Summit and Biblical Worldview Ministries. It was fabulous to get to know your son there and to watch him interact with other fine people. So yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
letting me back on the podcast today.
Oh, it's so much fun. So your book is about resilience and we hear a lot about resilience. My kids are in public school and hear a lot like we want these kids to be resilient. We want them to have the growth mindset. We have seminars to help them be resilient. So people are definitely talking about resilience, but when you observe what's happening like in the middle school classroom or the high school classroom or in colleges, you are thinking, wait a minute, but these kids are not really they don't
Mm.
seem resilient. They seem fragile. Like the smallest thing kind of takes them really, a while to recover from. So, will you define resilience? Like when you're talking about resilience, what does that mean?
I will. And those were fascinating comments. And we'll have to come back to that
Yeah,
opening statement.
yeah.
Yeah, resiliency, I define it, Arlene, as recovering readily from difficulties,
I like that.
recovering readily, not staying down in the valley any longer than is appropriate. I used to define it as bouncing back from tragedy, like little Tigger in Winnie the Pooh, but it dawned on me that that's pretty unrealistic. Um, a child who falls down when learning how to walk bounces back up because mom and dad are there with a camera holding out their arms with a smile on their face, come to mama, and they're
Mhm.
highly motivated to learn how to walk. But I think that that's actually pretty rare. What I want for kids of all ages, and really for adults who are listening, is that we would readily recover from difficulties, trauma, disappointment, grief, fear. It's a choice, starts as a choice to stand back up. It becomes a learned ability the more that we choose to do that right thing. And then, Arlene, it becomes a part of character. And that's what's exciting for me is that because you and I, Arlene, I think for the most part, we don't have to think about being resilient. We just are resilient. It becomes a part of our identity. And that's what I want for our kids so that no matter who's around them, they bounce back, they come back, they stand back up and try again.
Yeah. Go ahead and circle back to the comments that I made in the beginning as we opened the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciated that. You were talking about how we talk about resilience in our schools, and we might occasionally, shout from the front of the classroom, have a growth mindset. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid of, the challenge. Arlene, we can't just talk about it. We have to model it. We have to teach it. We have to correct it, and we have to affirm it.
Mm.
And I think the modeling of it becomes a key. Our moms and dads, grandparents, and educators willing to show their children that some things are hard
Yeah.
and they try again. They reach out for help. I think one of the most important qualities of a resilient person is that we call someone who can help us overcome what was challenging. Do our kids see us reach out to our moms, to a neighbor, to a spouse to say, hey, I was struggling with this. Can you give me any advice? So do we model it? Do we appropriately respond to challenges? Do our kids hear us throw a little pity party every time somebody treats us wrongly? And then do we teach it? Do we teach kids, if you will, how to stand back up, or do we just expect them to?
It's so true that it's okay. What are we doing? So if let's kind of role play. If your daughter comes home and she's really upset, I got a bad grade. I'm so upset, but it's all my teacher's fault because my teacher didn't prepare us right. My teacher is a bad teacher, and it's my teacher's fault. And so you think like, okay, how are you going to recover from this in a positive way? Kind of talk us through what that mom might say.
Oh my goodness, Arlene. Way to ask an easy question.
Yeah.
No, that and such a true example. It really is. Blaming others, first of all, is a sign of a non-resilient person. So that's interesting that you would use that example. Kids who blame and who don't take responsibility for their part of the problem are not in a healthy space. The first thing that I want to recommend, Arlene, is that we do feel their pain. You and I both know that if children feel like we're ignoring their emotion and we jump right to the solution, that they are the problem to solve, not that they have a problem. So we must be very careful. So we say something like, boy, I bet that's frustrating. I'm sorry that happened. Well, I can tell that you're really disappointed. So you first respond to the frustration. And then, depending upon age and stage in your relationship with your child and how well you know your child, I would be tempted to say, now let's unpack this a little bit more, and maybe we say, are you telling me the truth? I mean, maybe you're that blunt. Maybe you're even more blunt and you say, did you forget that there was a test?
Right.
I don't remember that you were studying the night before last. Is there any, and did you have any responsibility here? I think we boldly ask the question.
Yeah.
I would love, Arlene, I would love for the child to bring it up so that they feel empowered and successful in that admitting their fault. That's why I would love to say, tell me more of the story, keep talking. Why don't you think more clearly about the whole thing and come back to me in 10 minutes? Because if the child can admit, Mom, I overreacted, the teacher probably wasn't the only one, then they
Yeah.
feel better about themselves.
Yeah, good. And you know what's so funny is, so that same example is the parent. The parent comes home, "Oh, I didn't get the promotion because my boss is such a jerk because this so and so, they're friends. I see them talking in the coffee space
Hmm.
and they're all talking to each other. So of course they got the job, and we do the same thing."
Yeah.
So for us to realize this is how we model it too, by taking responsibility to say, "You know what? I didn't get the promotion. I'm disappointed, but I'm going to ask my boss, like, what could I do better next time, next quarter and let them see us trying to do that again." I really like that. You talk in the book about the difference between failure and a mistake.
Mm.
So, what are those differences, and how can we talk in that language with our kids when they come to us with something that didn't go right?
Well, I appreciate that question. I was just at an event the other day in North Carolina, and I encouraged the family, the moms and the dads, to discuss with their children the definition of those two terms and agree as a family that in our family, this is what we mean by mistake. Arlene, a mistake is something that didn't go right. It could be that we didn't study enough, we don't have enough life experiences, maybe our attitude got in the way, maybe the instruction was a little bit confusing, and that's why we made a mistake. It's something that just didn't go right. We didn't do as well maybe as we could have. What I think is interesting, Arlene, and really pretty tragic, is that children define it as I am stupid. They think that when they've made a mistake, they're stupid. And it could be striking out at the home plate. It could be a spelling test. It could be a piano piece at a recital. Man, I'm just so stupid. So if we say to our children, well, what's the big deal, Jonathan? You just made a mistake. They just heard you say, what's the big deal? You're just stupid. So we've got to make sure that we define it with our kids. And the thing about failure too, I don't even like the word. I don't know about you, but I would almost like us to not use it. The kind of the joke line, although it's true, is that failure isn't fatal and it's not final. What is that? Again, children think that if they fail, they're bad. Failure is accumulated mistakes. Failure is not learning from the mistakes. That's a tough one. How can I throw it back to you, Arlene? How do you define those words? What do you think about the word failure?
Yeah.
Does it have a place?
It is interesting, like, as you're talking about it, it makes you think, like, maybe we shouldn't even use this word failure and just talk about a mistake. And then I think maybe sometimes when I hear the word failure, I think of it more like a calculated mistake.
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
something that they did on purpose, so they lied on purpose. They knew they were going to do it. They did it. They thought it would save their skin and they tried it. And then you would say, okay, that was a failure on your part. You failed to kind of recognize, whatever the case may be. So it's a little bit more, maybe more moral, more
Mm.
sustained, like you see them do it over and over and over again. So let's say your kid is skipping school. And so you're thinking, like, okay, in this area of just showing up to school, you're failing in this area. It's not just a one time mistake, it's something that you're repeatedly doing. But again, like we're saying, that's not who you are, it's just what you're doing. So, how can we turn this around for you? So, very much like you think it's an event, it's not a person. I think this was Zig Ziglar said. So trying, but I like how you help us to think, like, how does your child see this? How is your child
Mhm.
understanding these words? But I think mistake is more like, hey, you made an honest mistake. Anyone could have dropped the frisbee. Anyone, could have said the wrong thing because they were nervous. And then you just say, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that, like that's a mistake. But you did that on purpose, or you're doing that over and over again, or you really did that to hurt somebody. Like this is something we've got to deal with. And I would probably classify that more in my mind as a failure.
I really actually like that. I know of children who sabotage themselves. They choose not to study because they decide a C takes all the pressure off because they don't think that they're capable of an A. And if they earn a B, then mom and dad are going to go, now you can earn an A. And
Right.
they don't want the academic
Yeah.
stress. Or I know kids, this is so funny, but I know kids who don't make their bed for fear that mom will find out they can make it. And then mom's going to expect them to make it every day because that's how they know it all works.
These
So
kids are very smart.
that's a really excellent point that would be a failing yourself
Yeah.
by making some foolish
Yeah.
decisions. And I think just, Arlene, I think it's valuable for us to talk with our kids about, again, what causes mistakes. Yeah,
Mhm.
there are times when other people fail us, and there are things that go wrong, if you will. And that's okay to admit that, but we're not going to camp there. We're going to ask ourselves, was I prepared? Was I remembering? Did I have my ruler and my scissors and my colored pencils? And was I ready to do the job well?
Yeah. Yeah. You talk in the book about something called zapping, which I thought was really good because I think we do it and we don't realize we're doing it, this negative communication to our kids. And it's the kind of thing where we say to one girl, like, oh, yay, you got an A. Good job. You're finally like doing something like your sister. So it's like
Yep.
this compliment that is a zap. Help us kind of, give us a little pep talk so we stop doing that.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for calling that out. Yeah, the word finally, this is great. You finally got it. What you just reminded your daughter was that for ages she's been really, quote unquote, stupid or incapable. And another zap word, of course, is the word but, where we'll say to our child, your sentences were intriguing. I loved the way that you used your adjectives and your verbs. Now your punctuation was terrible. Or but your punctuation was terrible. And all they remember is the punctuation was terrible. So, I think it's a passive aggressive way of putting kids in their place. I think it's negative. I think it's our fatigue. And I think, Arlene, for a lot of moms and dads, we want our children to do very, very well. So we want to point out what they're not doing well. So we say, your sentences were fabulous, adjectives, rich verbs, really impressed with that. But your punctuation, that's our desire that they would learn to punctuate their sentences. We mean well. So I don't want anyone to feel bad who's listening to you and me right now. This is the pattern and the habit that we've gotten into. I want us to put a period there. Your sentences were excellent, vivid verbs, rich adjectives, great job. The next time you do an assignment like this, please remember punctuation also matters. There were places where you didn't have any punctuation at all. There were places where you had periods where you needed to have question marks. So let's make sure that we continue to work on that. There's just something less painful than the word but.
Yeah. It's like the but like canceled all this stuff beforehand. But this one, you put a
Yeah,
period on it and then add a PS. Next time,
right.
let's work on that punctuation.
Right. And you know what, Arlene? Maybe we don't even say it at the same time.
Yeah, maybe it's later.
Maybe we
Yeah,
let them celebrate the fact that their verbs and their adjectives were really
yeah,
well chosen. And I was able to picture the sentences in my mind. Great job. And then maybe the next day when you're going to give your child a similar assignment, you say, hey, today, please remember that you are old enough now to remember if a question mark is necessary. So I'm going to be looking at that when I evaluate your work today.